Little MAGA girl kicked out of Starbucks by leftist manager, but a WWII veteran stepped in and... Subscribe to the channel right now to find out the end of this epic story and comment below which part of this great America you are watching from. The autumn afternoon poured a golden melancholic light onto the city streets, but inside the modern coffee shop, the atmosphere was artificially frigid. The air conditioning hummed with an aggressive sterility, mixing with the strong smell of roasted beans and sugary syrups. To most, the establishment was just a stop for caffeine and Wi-Fi, a refuge from routine. But for Sarah, a 14-year-old girl with blonde curls that seemed to catch the sunlight itself, crossing that tempered glass door was like entering an invisible war zone. Sarah walked with the lightness of one who doesn't yet carry the weight of the world on her back, but her shoulders were slightly tense. She clutched the straps of her hot pink backpack, a vibrant childish contrast against the minimalist grey decor of the place. She was only there to wait for her mother, who was at the doctor's office next door. All she wanted was a hot chocolate and a quiet corner to do her history homework. However, in the eyes of that social microcosm, Sarah had committed an unforgivable crime. Resting on her golden curls was a red baseball cap. A simple, sturdy cotton baseball cap with 5 white letters embroidered in capital font. Trump. To Sarah, that cap wasn't a manifesto of hatred. It was a souvenir from the rallies she'd watched on television with her father. It was the symbol of an America she'd learned to love in bedtime stories, a strong, prosperous, and free America. It was her quiet way of saying, "I believe." But in that environment saturated with progressive ideology, the red cap shone like a radioactive danger sign. As the door closed behind her, isolating her from the outside world, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first. The buzz of conversations lowered, heads turned, gazes, previously indifferent, became sharp and accusatory. Young college students, hunched over their laptops with social cause stickers, looked up and frowned. The silent judgment was palpable, a physical pressure that seemed to push Sarah out. She tried to ignore it. "It's just a hat," she repeated mentally, trying to calm her heart, which was starting to beat faster. "I have the right to wear it. It's a free country." But freedom seemed a distant concept inside those walls. Sarah headed to the counter, behind the chrome espresso machine, which hissed steam like a mechanical serpent, stood him, the manager. He didn't look like a service provider. He looked like a gatekeeper, a man in his 20s, thin, with a stance of studied arrogance. His green apron was stained with coffee, but it was the rest of his appearance that screamed his ideological affiliation. His hair was dyed an aggressive neon green. Shaved on the sides, a beacon of his performative nonconformity. Metal piercings punctured his eyebrow and nose, and his arms were covered in tattoos featuring anarchist symbols and anti-capitalist slogans, ironically displayed while he worked for one of the world's largest corporations. He was laughing with a co-worker, wiping the counter with a damp cloth. But when his eyes, lined with black pencil, landed on Sarah, or rather on the top of Sarah's head, the laughter died instantly. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside him. The look of professional boredom was replaced by a mask of visceral disgust. He didn't see a child. He didn't see a customer. He saw the enemy. He saw the embodiment of everything his online forums and radical professors told him to hate and destroy. The little MAGA girl wasn't a person to him. She was a legitimate target in the culture war. Sarah, oblivious to the depth of the hatred she had just awakened, approached the register with a shy, hesitant smile. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice soft and polite, a contrast to the pretentious indie music playing on the speakers. "I'd like a small hot chocolate, please, with whipped cream." The manager didn't answer. He remained motionless, the cleaning rag dripping dirty water onto the counter. He stared at her with a fixed, predatory look, analyzing the red cap as if it were a swastika. The silence stretched, becoming awkward, heavy, suffocating. "Sir?" Sarah tried again, her smile faltering. "Are you still serving?" The man with the green hair let out an audible breath, a sound of pure scorn. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning over the counter to invade the girl's personal space. "We serve people," he said, his voice dripping poison. "We don't serve purveyors of hate." Sarah blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I don't understand." "You heard perfectly fine." The manager raised his voice, ensuring the customers at nearby tables heard his virtue-signaling performance. "Look at you, walking in here with that thing on your head. Do you think this is funny? Do you think you can come into my safe space and rub your intolerance in our faces?" Sarah's face burned. The blood rushed to her cheeks, not from anger, but from a sudden, excruciating shame. She felt the eyes of everyone in the shop burning her back. No one rose to defend her. On the contrary, some customers nodded in agreement, validating the manager's aggression. "It's just a Trump hat," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I like him. I'm not doing anything wrong." "You are existing," this leftist too retorted, slamming his hand on the counter hard enough to make the paper cups rattle. "That cap is a symbol of violence. It's a symbol of racism, of sexism, of everything rotten in this country, and I will not be an accomplice to it. I refuse to take the dirty money of someone who supports the destruction of democracy." His distorted logic was ruthless. To him, humiliating a 14-year-old girl was an act of anti-fascist heroism. He felt powerful, righteous, a warrior of light against the darkness, failing to realize that he was the tyrant in the situation. Sarah took a step back, clutching her own backpack like a shield, her blue eyes filled with tears. She had never seen so much hate directed at her. She was a good student, went to church, helped her neighbors. How could she be a monster? "Please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'm just waiting for my mom. I can take the hat off if—" "No." The manager cut her off, his eyes blazing with fanaticism. "Taking it off isn't enough. The damage is already done. You have already contaminated the environment. You have offended us. You have offended me." He stepped out from behind the counter, circling the coffee machine. He was tall and thin, but to Sarah he looked like a threatening giant. He advanced toward her in the main seating area, cornering her. "We don't want your kind here," he hissed, now close enough for her to smell stale cigarette and old coffee on his breath. "People like you think you own the world, but the world has changed, little girl. We're in charge now, and we don't tolerate fascists." Sarah was paralyzed. Fear froze her lungs. She looked at the glass door where the sun shone outside, so close yet so unattainable. She was trapped in the shadow of woke ideology, surrounded by adults who allowed a child to be emotionally destroyed. She was the Trump girl. Alone, small, and about to be crushed by the boot of intolerance, disguised as social justice. The neon green-haired manager didn't stop at verbal intimidation, feeling validated by the complacent silence of the hipster clientele and the approving looks of some college students who saw the scene as a live revolution. He decided to turn Sarah's expulsion into a spectacle of public virtue. He wanted the moment recorded, shared, and applauded by his digital bubble. He wanted to be the hero who crushed fascism during the afternoon rush. He began to gesticulate dramatically, his tattooed arms cutting the air like blades. "Are you not listening to me?" he bellowed, his voice shrill, shattering any pretense of civility. "This is a progressive establishment. We support inclusion. And your inclusion was revoked the moment you put that red garbage on your head." Sarah backed up another step, her sneakers squeaking on the polished wooden floor. She felt her heart beating in her throat, a frantic drum of panic. She looked around, searching for a friendly face, a responsible adult, anyone who could say, "Hey, stop that, she's just a kid." But there was no one. The customers had transformed into a Roman Colosseum audience, thirsty for the social blood of this small Christian girl thrown to the lions of cancel culture. Smartphones were raised, recording lights blinking like red digital eyes, capturing every second of her terror for the court of the internet. I'm leaving," Sarah stammered, holding the straps of her pink backpack so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Just let me go." "Oh, you're leaving all right," the manager sneered, blocking her path to the door with his thin but aggressive body. "But not before you learn a lesson. You think you can just walk around normalizing hate? You think your choices have no consequences? You are the face of the problem, girl. You are white supremacy disguised as innocence." The accusation was so absurd, so disconnected from the reality of a 14-year-old girl who liked to draw unicorns and read the Bible, that Sarah couldn't even process it. White supremacy? Her? She just loved her country. She just loved the idea that America was a place where anyone could be great. The manager's fury reached a new peak. In a fit of theatrical rage, he spun around and slammed his hand hard onto a nearby table where a customer had left a tray. Splat! The violent impact sent a half-full coffee cup flying. The dark, hot liquid described an arc in the air before landing with a wet thud at Sarah's feet, splashing onto her shins and staining her white sneakers. The dark puddle spread across the floor like an oil slick, a visual representation of the ugliness of the situation. "Look what you made me do!" the leftist screamed, reversing the blame with the skill of a sociopathic manipulator. "Your toxic energy is destroying this place. You're dirtying my store." Sarah looked at the spilled coffee, then at the man's contorted face. The strong smell of the beverage now mixed with the sour smell of fear. She was trembling uncontrollably. The humiliation was complete. She was no longer a customer. She was trash, something to be swept away. "Clean that up," the manager hissed, in a low, cruel tone, pointing to the floor. "Get on your knees and clean up the mess you caused." It was a power play. He wanted to see her on her knees. He wanted the total submission of the symbol she wore. "No," Sarah whispered, tears now flowing freely, hot and salty. "It wasn't me." "You refuse?" The man laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. He took a step forward, invading Sarah's final zone of safety. He was so close she could see the dilated pores on his pierced nose. "Then I'll help you. I'll help you get rid of that source of evil." His eyes fixed on the red cap. That piece of fabric was the object of his obsession, the focus of all his ideological hatred. He reached out his hand, fingers clenched like claws, stained with pen ink and coffee grounds. "Take it off," he ordered. "Take it off, or I'm going to rip it off your head and burn it in the street." Sarah let out a muffled cry and brought her hands to her head, protecting the cap, protecting her identity, protecting her father's gift. "No! It's mine! You can't! I can do anything in here. I am the authority. I am justice!" The manager roared, completely intoxicated by his petty power. "That cap is violence, and I am neutralizing the violence." He lunged forward. His hand grabbed the air, inches from Sarah's face. The girl closed her eyes and flinched, cornered against a shelf of expensive mugs for sale. She felt the rush of air caused by his abrupt movement. Physical violence was a millisecond away. The world had gone mad. Logic had died. There, under the artificial light and the apathetic gaze of modern society, a child was about to be assaulted by an adult simply because of a political opinion. Sarah's despair was absolute. She prayed silently, calling for her mother, calling for God, calling for anyone who still had an ounce of decency. "Please, someone help me. Please don't let him hurt me." The manager, seeing the terror in her eyes, smiled, a cruel smile of triumph. He was going to do it. He was going to tear off that fascist symbol and be acclaimed as a hero by his peers. He prepared the final move, the snake's strike. But fate, or perhaps divine providence, had other plans, plans that involved not submission, but justice, plans that wore a very different uniform from that dirty coffee apron. The manager's ink-stained fingers were millimeters from the red fabric of the cap. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, holding her breath, bracing herself for the violent tug, for the final violation of her space and dignity. The air in the coffee shop seemed to have been sucked out, leaving only the vacuum of fear and the static electricity of injustice. The triumph of the radical woke seemed guaranteed, sealed by the passivity of a society that forgot how to defend the innocent. Crash! The sound didn't come from the manager. It came from the entrance door. It wasn't just opened, it was thrown open, with a force that made the warning bell sound not like a cheerful chime, but like an alert gong. The afternoon sunlight, previously filtered timidly, burst into the room like a divine spotlight, cutting through the artificial gloom of the shop and momentarily blinding the onlookers. A silhouette emerged in the doorway, immense, imposing. "Halt!" The voice was thunder, deep, resonant, forged in the gravel of battlefields and tempered by decades of command discipline. It wasn't a hysterical cry of protest. It was a direct military order. The kind that makes soldiers stop mid-firefight and civilians freeze instinctively. The manager froze. His hand stopped in the air, trembling, hovering over Sarah's head like the petrified claw of a gargoyle. The spell of his petty, tyrannical power was instantly broken. He turned his head, eyes wide, the arrogance draining from his face to be replaced by primitive shock. Stepping into the light, the figure revealed himself. He wasn't a common customer looking for coffee. He was American history itself, marching into the present. He was the General Wu. He wore his United States Army dress uniform, a deep, impeccable dark blue, with not a single crease out of place. The fabric seemed to absorb the frivolity of the environment and return seriousness. On his chest, a constellation of medals and colored ribbons shone with an almost supernatural intensity. The Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, and at the top, the ultimate proof of valor, the Medal of Honor, implied. He held a polished wooden cane with a metal tip, but he didn't lean on it with weakness. He wielded it like a scepter of authority, or perhaps like a sheathed sword. Despite his advanced age, with a face marked by the trenches of time. Figurative expression, his posture was as erect as a marble pillar. His eyes, shaded by the brim of his military garrison cap, swept the room with the precision of a sniper, identifying the threat in milliseconds. The silence that fell over the coffee shop was absolute. The indie music stopped. Conversations ceased. Keyboards stopped clicking. The general advanced. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of the metal tip of his cane hitting the wooden floor echoed rhythmically, each beat a hammer of judgment approaching the counter. He stopped 6 feet from the scene of the moral crime, creating a triangle of tension: the weeping girl, the cowardly manager, and the legendary warrior. "What do you think you're doing, young man?" the general asked. His voice dropped to a dangerously calm tone, the sound of the sea retreating before the tsunami. "I've seen men try to rip freedom from others with bayonets and tanks. I never thought I'd see an adult man try to do the same to a child in an American coffee shop." The manager, the green-haired leftist, tried to regain his composure. He adjusted his apron, trying to invoke the moral superiority he felt seconds earlier. But in front of that living monument of duty and sacrifice, his virtue seemed pathetic. "You "You don't understand, sir." The manager stammered, his voice cracking. "This girl, she's spreading hate. She's wearing a symbol of oppression. I'm protecting this space. I'm defending democracy against fascism." The general let out a short, dry, humorless laugh. It was a sound that cut into the manager's soul. "Fascism?" The veteran repeated the word with disgust. He took a step forward, invading the manager's space with overwhelming energy. "You speak that word as if you know the taste of it. I've smelled real fascism, son. I've seen what it does. Fascism is silencing dissent. Fascism is forcing conformity through fear. Fascism is a man screaming at a defenseless little girl and forcing her to her knees." He pointed the cane at the manager's chest, the metal tip lightly touching the resist button the man wore on his apron. "Look at yourself. You are not the resistance. You are the tyrant. You are exactly what you claim to fight, just wearing different clothes and using pretty words." The manager backed away, stumbling over his own feet, shrinking against the coffee machine. The truth of those words, coming from someone who had bled for the freedom he was using so lightly, stripped him of any argument. The general then shifted his gaze from the villain and focused on Sarah. The transformation in his face was miraculous. The commander's hardness melted, revealing a grandfather's tenderness. He ignored the puddle of coffee on the floor, ignored the mess, and positioned himself between the girl and the aggressor, an insurmountable human shield. "Head up, soldier," he said softly to Sarah. Sarah, still trembling, looked up. Through her tears, she saw the generals and stars on his shoulder, gleaming. She felt a wave of warmth and security she hadn't felt since entering that cursed shop. He said my hat is hate," Sarah sobbed, her voice small. "He was going to take it from me." The general reached out his gloved hand and, with a gesture of extreme delicacy, adjusted the brim of the red cap on her head, ensuring it was firm. "This hat," the general said, turning to the manager and raising his voice so the entire coffee shop could hear, "is protected by the blood of my brothers. I fought on the beaches of Normandy, froze in the forests of the Ardennes, and saw hell on earth to ensure this American citizen had the sacred right to wear whatever she wants, support whoever she wants, and think whatever she wants." He tapped the cane on the floor again, punctuating his statement. "Freedom of speech does not exist to protect what you like to hear, young man. It exists to protect what you hate. If you can't serve coffee to someone with a different opinion without losing your humanity, then you're not an activist. You're just a bully in an apron." The coffee shop was paralyzed. The students who had been filming now lowered their phones, ashamed. The narrative had changed. The video that was going to be "Hero Manager Expels Fascist" was now "War Hero Humiliates Coffee Tyrant." The manager was backed against the wall, pale, defeated. His ideological fury evaporated, leaving only a scared boy facing a real man. "Apologize," the general commanded. It was not a request. "Apologize to this young patriot for the shame you put her through, now." The climax reached its peak. The manager's raw physical force was nullified by the general's absolute moral force. Sarah was safe behind the blue wall of the uniform. But the manager, though cornered, still represented the vengeful system. His humiliation could generate one last attempt at bureaucratic retaliation. The general's order hung in the air, heavy and non-negotiable. "Apologize." The green-haired manager, huddled against the white-tiled wall, looked like a caged animal. The mask of social justice warrior had fallen completely, revealing only an immature, frightened young man facing the real consequences of his actions. He looked around, desperately seeking the support of his peers, but the community he claimed to protect had dissolved. Students pretended to type on their laptops, avoiding eye contact. The silence was deafening. With clenched teeth, hatred fighting against fear, the manager mumbled something inaudible, looking at his own coffee-stained shoes. "I didn't hear you, son," the general said, his voice sharp as a whip. "When I gave orders in the infantry, I expected them to be heard all the way to the rear. Speak up." The manager's face turned red, a mix of shame and impotent rage. "Sorry!" He spat the word out as if it were poison. "Sorry for yelling." It was not a sincere apology, and everyone knew it. It was the forced capitulation of a defeated bully. But for the general, it was enough to establish the point. The public humiliation of the aggressor was the necessary moral victory. However, the subtle leftists' ego could not accept total defeat without trying one last treacherous lunge. He knew he couldn't beat the general in strength or character, so he resorted to the only weapon he had left: systemic bureaucracy. As he stepped away from the counter, the manager picked up the store's landline phone with trembling hands. A vengeful sneer curled his lips. "All right, you've had your little show," he hissed, regaining a sliver of his usual arrogance. "But it's over now. I'm the manager here, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone who disturbs the peace." He pointed the receiver at the general and Sarah. "Get out of my store now. Both of you, you're banned. If you don't leave in 30 seconds, I'm calling the police and reporting trespassing and physical threat. Let's see how your medals help you when you're handcuffed for harassing an employee at his place of work." It was the classic tactic, playing the victim and using the state to crush dissent. Sarah, who was beginning to calm down, felt panic return. Police? Handcuffs? The image of the general being led away because of her was unbearable. "Sir," she whispered, pulling the sleeve of the veteran's uniform. "Please, let's go. I don't want you to get in trouble. He'll lie about us." The general, however, didn't even blink. He looked at the manager with an expression of absolute boredom, as if he were watching a spoiled child in a supermarket. "Call the police?" The general let out a deep laugh. "Go ahead, young man. Make the call. Tell them that General Marcus Vance, retired, is here. Tell them I stopped an adult man from assaulting a minor. I'm sure the officer who responds will be very happy to review the security camera footage." He pointed his cane at the small black camera in the corner of the ceiling, a detail the manager, in his blind fury, had forgotten. "Those cameras recorded you throwing coffee. They recorded you yelling. They recorded you raising your hand to a child. Do you really want to bring the law here? Because I have lawyers who would love to turn this little coffee kingdom of yours into a college fund for this young lady." The color drained from the manager's face. The legal threat was real. He knew the corporation he worked for would fire him in a heartbeat to avoid a public relations scandal involving a decorated war veteran and a child. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the counter. He was cornered, defeated physically, morally, and now legally. "Get out," he whispered, defeated, not looking at them. "Just get out of here." The general nodded, satisfied. He had neutralized the poison. He turned to Sarah, completely ignoring the manager's existence from that moment on. He took an impeccably folded, white linen handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "Wipe your eyes, Sarah," he said tenderly. "A soldier doesn't let the enemy see their pain after the battle. You were brave today." Sarah took the handkerchief. It smelled of mint and something old and comforting. She dried her face, feeling the strength return to her legs. "Thank you, General," she said, her voice firmer. "I thought I was alone." "That's what they want you to feel," the general replied, placing his hand on her shoulder and guiding her toward the exit. "Fear is the only tool they have, but when you stand up, their fear disappears. They are shadows, Sarah, and shadows do not survive the light." as they walked to the door. The customers who had previously judged Sarah now looked away, ashamed. The atmosphere in the coffee shop had changed from hostility to a silent, embarrassed respect. The general's presence had reminded everyone there that there is something greater than the politics of the moment. There is honor. Upon reaching the door, the general paused and looked back one last time. The manager was pretending to clean the coffee machine, his back turned, small and insignificant. His safe space had been violated by the truth, and he would never be the same. "Let's go," the general said, opening the door for her. "The air in here is stale. Let's breathe the air of freedom outside." They stepped onto the sidewalk, leaving behind the artificial darkness of ideology and entering the warm light of the late afternoon. The battle was won, the threat neutralized, but the final confirmation was still needed for Sarah. She needed to know that her future and her faith in the country were secure. Act 5. The March of Hope. The torch is passed. The coffee shop door closed behind them, muffling the hum of the air conditioning and the ideological toxicity that reigned inside. On the sidewalk, the world seemed to have regained its colors. The late afternoon sun bathed the city in a warm, amber light, and the cool autumn breeze dried the last traces of tears on Sarah's face. Beside General Marcus Vance, she no longer felt like a small, scared girl. She felt like she was part of something monumental, like a statue that had withstood the storm. The general walked to a nearby iron bench, beneath the shadow of an old oak tree, and gestured for Sarah to sit. He remained standing, leaning on his cane, watching the street traffic with the calmness of one who has seen empires fall and rise. "You know, Sarah," he began, his voice now gentle, devoid of the tone of command, but still full of gravity. "That man in there, he thinks he's strong because he yells. He thinks he's virtuous because he hates. But he's the weakest of all because he needs everyone to think like him to feel safe." Sarah looked at the red cap in her hands. She had taken it off momentarily to adjust her hair. "It's hard sometimes, General," she confessed. "Sometimes I feel like the whole world is against us. At school, on TV, they say we're bad." The general looked at her with deep compassion. He pointed his cane at the American flag fluttering atop a federal building across the street. "The world is noisy, my dear, and fools always yell the loudest. But don't confuse noise with numbers. Don't confuse the shouting in that coffee shop with the heart of America." He approached, and with trembling but steady hands, took the red cap from her hands. He held it with respect, as if it were part of his own uniform. "When I landed in Europe, I didn't fight for a party. I fought for a promise, the promise that in this country a 14-year-old girl could wear a red cap, a blue cap, or a purple cap without fear. This cap," he handed the object back to her, placing it gently on her golden curls, "is proof that the promise still lives. As long as you have the courage to wear it, we haven't lost." Sarah adjusted the brim, feeling the symbolic weight of the moment. The fear had completely vanished, replaced by a burning pride that warmed her chest. "I'll wear it," she said, smiling for the first time. "I won't take it off. That's my girl." The general smiled, and the wrinkles around his eyes deepened with affection. "Courage is contagious, Sarah. Today you saw cowardice retreat. Remember that. Evil cannot stand to be confronted by the truth." Just then, a fire truck drove by, slowing down at the traffic light. The driver, a sturdy man with a mustache, saw the general in his dress uniform and the girl with the Trump's hull cap. He didn't need words. He rolled down his window and honked the horn, 2 short, loud blasts, and gave a thumbs up, shouting, "God bless y'all!" Right behind, an older woman walking with her grandson stopped and waved, smiling at the scene. A group of construction workers across the street raised their hard hats in salute. Sarah looked around, amazed. They're with us, she whispered. They always have been, the general confirmed. That's the more silent majority. They work, they pray, they love this country. They're not on Twitter yelling hate. They're building America. And they're looking at you now, Sarah, and seeing the future. General Vance straightened his posture, ignoring the pain in his knees. He knew his mission here was accomplished. He had protected innocence and passed the torch. My patrol ends here, soldier, he said. Your mother must be worried. Go meet her and tell her an old soldier secured the perimeter. Sarah stood up, and in a surge of gratitude and respect, he tried to imitate the military salute she had seen in movies. It was clumsy but sincere. Thank you, General, for everything. The veteran returned the salute, his perfect, sharp, laden with honor. Stay strong, Sarah. Freedom is never free, but it's worth every cent. Sarah turned and ran toward the entrance of the doctor's office, where her mother had just appeared in the doorway. Looking worried, seeing her daughter smiling, with the red cap gleaming in the sun, the mother sighed with relief. Before entering, Sarah looked back. General Marcus Vance was already walking away, slowly down the sidewalk, his silhouette outlined against the setting sun. He looked like an eternal guardian, watching the borders of freedom. The Khan Trump girl entered the building, safe, happy, and stronger than ever. The leftist manager's attempt at humiliation failed spectacularly. Instead of breaking her, he forged her. Instead of silencing her, he gave her a voice. And so the story ends, with tyranny defeated, honor restored, and a patriotic girl ready to face the world, knowing that the heroes of the past always walk beside her.